Hi guys, here we are again to read chapters 4 and 5 of Bunnicula. So, chapter 4, A Cat Prepares. I almost didn't make it to my meeting with Chester that night. Toby had a feast in his room. It was Friday night, and on Friday nights, Toby gets to stay up and read as late as he wants to. So of course he needs lots of food to keep up his strength. Good food like cheese crackers, chocolate cupcakes, my very favorite, the kind with ice cream in the middle. Pretzels, and peanut butter sandwiches. The last I cannot abide because my mouth always gets stuck. Chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center, however, are another story. This particular evening, I stationed myself on Toby's stomach. Usually I'm a little more subtle, but having missed out on the bacon breakfast, I was not about to take any chances on the chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center. Toby knew what I was after, but sometimes he thinks he's funny and plays little games with me. Hi, Harold. I bet you like a peanut butter sandwich, wouldn't you? Here, have this one that's left over from yesterday. Well, I eat this boring old chocolate cupcake, which is nice and fresh and has cream in the middle. Okay, Harold? Ha ha, my sides are splitting. What's the matter? Don't you want the peanut butter sandwich? All right, I'll put it away for another night. Oh, here's something you might like. It's a green sour ball from Dad's candy dish that was stuck to my sock. Would you like that, huh, pal? Oh boy, this kid is really hot tonight. No, huh? Well, I'd give you one of my cupcakes, but I know how much you hate chocolate. Would a little drooling on your stomach help convince you otherwise? Oh, you like chocolate? Okay then, you can have both of them. One thing I have to say about Toby, although he's got a rotten sense of humor, he's a nice kid. Naturally, once I'd eaten both cupcakes, which took approximately 4 seconds, I felt obliged to hang around and let Toby know I was grateful. What better way to share than to share a few of his cheese crackers? Well, Harold, Toby said sometime later, we've had quite a party, but I have to go to sleep now. I can't keep my eyes open, so you'll have to wait till tomorrow to find out what happens in the next chapter. This is a good book, Harold. It's called Treasure Island, and it's by a man named Robert Louis Stevenson. It's kind of hard reading, though. I have to keep looking up the big words in the dictionary, and so it's taken me a long time to get through it. I've always had trouble with words myself. Half the time, they don't mean what I think they're going to, and then, even when I find out what they do mean, I forget the next day anyway. You might say that I'm smart, but not the scholarly type. But it's a really good story, Toby continued. It's all about pirates and this little boy just like me. No dogs. And a parrot, Harold. A parrot? What's a parrot? Is there anything about chocolate cake? That's my idea of treasure. Well, good night, Harold. If you're going to sleep here, you'll have to get off my stomach because it's a little full now. Good night, Toby. I curled up at the foot of the bed, but I couldn't sleep, trying to figure out what a parrot was. I thought it might be a lady pirate since the words kind of sounded something alike, but then again, I thought it might be an umbrella. Chester would know. I thought I would go downstairs and ask him. Well, you certainly took your time, Chester snapped as I sauntered casually into the room. I finished my book a half hour ago. Where were you? It so happens that I was discussing great works of literature with Toby. Since when was a Twinkies wrapper considered a great work of literature? I decided to ignore that. Unfortunately, several chocolate crumbs fell from my mouth to the floor at precisely that moment. As a matter of fact, I said, trying to valiantly regain my dignity, we were talking about Treasure Island. Ever heard of it? Ever heard of it, he sneered. I've read that when I was a kitten. Oh, then tell me, Chester, what is a parrot? Chester looked at me scornfully. A parrot, he said, is a tropical zygodactyl bird that has a stout, curved, hooked bill, is often crested, brightly variegated, and an excellent mimic. In other words, Harold, a parrot is a little bird with a big mouth. Oh, I said after a moment. I thought maybe it was an umbrella. Do you get Did you get so busy discussing parrots with Toby that you forgot you were going to meet me here? This is important, Harold. I still wasn't sure what a parrot was, but I decided this was not the time to pursue it. Come over here, Chester commanded, indicating his chair, and let me show you this book. I looked at the chair. Chester was already sitting in it with a very large book in front of him. I don't think there's going to be room for both of us, Chester, I said. Come on, you're wasting time. Just jump up here. I surveyed the scene carefully. I knew I had to get a running start since there was just a tiny spot left for me, and I would never be able to fit in if I pulled myself up slowly. Apparently, I was taking too long for Chester's liking. Will you get up here? He hissed. Okay, if that's what you want. I ran and jumped onto the chair, landing with a great kerplop. Chester, where are you? I cried. I couldn't see anything but the back of the chair. I'd forgotten to turn myself around. I'm here, you great oaf. I turned my head. What are you doing on the floor? I asked. You knocked me off the chair. Now just stay put. I'm coming back up. I moved to the back of the chair and Chester landed on the front. Now let's see, he said. We both have to see the book. You come over here and I'll move this way. I don't know if you've ever watched a cat try to decide where to sit, but it involves a lot of circling around, sitting, getting up again, circling some more, thinking about it, laying down, standing up, bathing a paw or tail, and circling. A dog, on the other hand, sits. This looks like a good spot, a dog will say to himself. Then he will lower his body into the spot in question, and is usually so secure in his decision that he will fall asleep immediately. Chester took what felt like 20 minutes to settle himself in, and just as I was drifting off, the kick started. Come on, Harold, quit hogging the seat and wake up. What are you trying to do? Take a little cat nap? I yawned. Now, said Chester, returning to the book, let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly is on your mind? I asked. The book, this book, and that rabbit, Chester replied. Now tell me, Harold, have you noticed anything funny about that rabbit? No, I said, but I've certainly noticed a lot of funny things about you recently. Think about it. That rabbit sleeps all day. So do I. So do you. Furthermore, so do I. So do you, said Harold. Furthermore, he's got a funny little sharp teeth. Chester replied. So do I. So do you, Harold said. Furthermore, he gets in and out of his cage by himself. What kind of rabbit can do that? A smart one, I said. I could do it. We're not talking about you, Harold. We're talking about that rabbit. Now, where did they find him? At the movies. Yes, but what movie? Dracula, I said. So, he said quickly, remember the note around his neck? What language was it in? An obscure dialect of the Carpathian mountain region, I answered smugly. He didn't know everything. Aha, Chester said, but what area of the Carpathian mountain region? Area? What's an area? I looked at him blankly. Transylvania, he cried triumphantly, and that proves my point. What point are we talking about? And don't forget the white tomato. That's the most important of all. But what? This book, said Chester, disregarding me, tells us just what we need to know. What? I practically screamed. What does it tell us? What does this book have to do with Bunnicula? What are you talking about? What's going on here? I can't stand it anymore. Chester regarded me coolly. You are really very excitable, Harold. That's not good for your blood pressure. I put my paws around his throat. Tell me, I said in a low, threatening voice, or I'll squeeze you till you pop. Okay, don't get upset. Now, this book tells you everything you've always wanted to know about vampires, but were afraid to ask. Personally, I never wanted to know anything about vampires, but at that moment, I was afraid to tell Chester. I still don't understand what vampires have to do with our furry little friend. 1, Chester said, vampires do not sleep at night. They only sleep during the day. The same holds true for this rabbit. 2, vampires can get in and out of locked rooms. Bunnicula gets in and out of his locked cage. This was beginning to interest me. Didn't you say something about the refrigerator? That's right. He got the refrigerator open, all by himself. 3. Vampires have long, pointed teeth called fangs. Well, don't we have fangs? No, we have canines. That's different. What's different about it? Fangs are more pointed, and vampires use fangs to bite people on the neck. Who'd want to do that? Vampires would, that's who. Wait a minute. I saw Mrs. Monroe bite Mr. Monroe on the neck. Does that mean she's a vampire? Boy, are you dumb. She's not a vampire. She's a lawyer. She bites necks. I don't think that's quite the same thing. Now, Bunnicula. Bunnicula does not bite people on the neck, at least not so far, but he does bite vegetables. On the neck? Vegetables don't have necks, Harold. Vegetables are like that. It's like dogs. Dogs don't have brains. Dogs are like that. Oh yeah, I said. Of course, if he bites vegetables, all rabbits bite vegetables. He bites them, Harold. He does not eat them. The tomato was all white. What does that mean? It means he paints vegetables, I ventured. It means he bites vegetables to make a hole in them, and then he sucks out all the juices. But what about all the lettuce and carrots that Toby's been feeding him in his cage? Aha, what indeed, Chester said. Look at this. Whereupon he stuck his paw under the chair cushion and brought out a flourish with an assortment of strange white objects. Some of them looked like unironed handkerchiefs, while the others didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. What are they? I asked. Chester smiled. Lettuce and carrots. White lettuce and carrots. I found them hidden behind his cage. I was aghast. What did it all mean? Could Chester be right? Was this harmless-looking little ball of fluff really a vampire? Just then, Chester let out a yelp. Look, he said, the cage is empty again. Oh, we're fools, fools. We've let him get out of our sight. It's your fault. My fault? You're the one who took 20 minutes to sit down. Well, if you hadn't knocked me off in the first place. Wait a minute. Why are we arguing? Let's just find Bunnicula. Just then, we heard a click in the kitchen. Refrigerator, I whispered. Chester nodded. We jumped down and moved cautiously to the kitchen door. Shh, Chester warned unnecessarily as we crept along. Don't make any noise. We don't want him to hear us coming. Obviously, I retorted. The light went out under the door. He must have closed the refrigerator, Chester said. Easy now. We pushed the door open. The kitchen was dark. There was not a sound. Psst, Chester. What? I can't see. I can, but I can't see him. He's not here. Then there was a soft scamper across the linoleum, and we turned just in time to see the little white tail bounce out the door and into the living room. Drat! We missed him. Come on, Harold. Let's see if we can catch up with him. Chester started towards the door. Wait, Chester. What's that on the floor by the refrigerator? He turned. This new object had interested him more than following Bunnicula. Watch out, he said. I'll take care of this. He slunk across the room slowly, muscles taut, eyes alert. When he was about 6 inches away, he stuck his paw out and closed his eyes and patted the object tentatively. I don't think he made any contact. Get closer, I said. Chester's eyes popped open. Who's the cat here? He said. I know what I'm doing. He proceeded to bat the air 3 more times. What is it? I squealed, my throat contracted in fear. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's not alive. Oh boy, if I wait for you, we'll be here all night. I walked bravely to the object and sniffed it. Well, asked Chester. Beats me. Chester came closer. After a moment of close examination, he gasped. I jumped. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Harold, Chester blurted. What? What is it, Chester? It's a white zucchini. There's the picture of Chester and his white zucchini. Okay, now for Chapter 5. Chapter 5. Chester goes into his act. The next morning I was awakened by a scream. Robert! Robert! Come down here right away. There's something wrong in the kitchen. For a moment, panic seized me. I thought she'd run out of dog food. But then I remembered the previous evening's events. Mr. Monroe came bounding down the stairs. "Chester, Chester," I cried. "Do you see Mr. Monroe? His face is turned white. It's Bunnicula, isn't it?" "No," he said calmly. "It's shaving cream, you idiot." By now, the experiment in the kitchen was at full throttle. The table was covered with Bunnicula's handiwork. There were white beans, white peas, and white squash, and white tomatoes, and white lettuce, and white zucchini. "What can it mean, Robert?" Mrs. Monroe was saying. "I'm getting worried. One tomato is a curiosity, but this is unheard of. There must be something wrong with our refrigerator. That's it. It's turning all the vegetables white." "But look," she said, "I left these tomatoes on the windowsill, and they're white too. And this squash I left in a bowl on the table." At that moment, Pete and Toby came into the kitchen. "Holy cow, what's going on?" "Hey, maybe it's vegetable blight, Mom. That could be it. That could be it, Robert. Did you ever hear of anything like that?" Well, no, actually. That is, I've heard of blight, but nothing like this." Chester leaned my way. "This will take forever if we leave it up to them. Sometimes human beings can be slow." I started to answer him, but I was heading for the table. "What about that friend of yours in the agriculture department?" "Oh, Tom Kerrigan? We could call him and see if we're doing something wrong." "It's DDT, Mom," Peter interjected. "I know about this stuff. It's because you buy vegetables that aren't organic." "All vegetables are organic, Peter," Mrs. Monroe replied. "That's not what my teacher says. See, Toby, I told you this could happen. They're using chemicals on our food, and if you're not careful, you'll turn white too. Like Dad." "Robert, couldn't you take that shaving cream off your face?" Yeah, of course. Where's my towel? I know I brought it down with me. For that matter, where is Chester? I'd seen him going towards the table, but I'd lost track of him listening to all that talk about DDT. I just hoped they didn't use any of that stuff where they grew chocolate cupcakes. "Pete, did you take my towel?" "Why would I take your towel, Dad? I don't shave." Just then the door swung open. I could not believe my eyes. There was Chester, with Mr. Monroe's towel draped across his back and tied under his neck like a cape. That was strange enough, but on his face was an expression that sent chills down my spine. His eyes were wide and staring. The corners of his mouth were pulled back in an evil grimace. His teeth were bared and gleaming in the morning light. He crackled and threw back his head as if he were laughing at all of us. I thought he completely lost his mind. "That's my towel!" "What's the matter, Chester? Were you cold?" Mr. Monroe bent down to take the towel from Chester. Before he could lay his hands on it, Chester flipped onto his back, closed his eyes, and folded his paws over his chest. It was a hideous sight. He opened his eyes wide with paws outstretched. He slowly lifted his head, eyes glazed and vacant. Soon the upper half of his body followed, all in one smooth flow until he was in the sitting position. So here, look. There is Chester. What do you think he's trying to act like? Is he trying to tell the Monroes something? Okay, where were we? "Chester is acting a little weird." "Well, son, some cats are funny creatures." I glanced at Chester. He wasn't laughing. "Psst, Chester, what are you up to?" "I'm a vampire, you dolt. Can't you tell? I'm trying to warn them." "Well, it's not working. You better think of something else." Chester frowned, apparently deep in thought. "So, you see, Toby," Mr. Monroe was explaining, "all cats are as individual as people. Maybe he just wants to get our attention. Isn't that right, kitty cat?" Ordinarily, Chester would have left the room upon being called kitty cat, but he was lost in thought. "Come on, Chester, give me back my towel, Mr. Monroe." Mr. Monroe moved closer to Chester. Chester's eyes lit up. He looked at me and smiled. I sensed I was not going to like what he had in mind. I was toying with the notion of slinking under the table when Chester fixed his eyes on me. How deep they were, like black pools. I felt myself floating, lost in them, my will no longer my own. I felt the inexplicable urge to murmur, "Yes, master," when he walked slowly, steadily towards me. As I drew nearer, I found myself unable to move. He stopped before me, never taking his gaze from me, and lunged. Yow! Mom, Chester bit Harold on the neck. Aw, that wasn't a real bite, was it, Chester? It was just a love bite. Isn't that cute? Love bite my foot. That hurt. Chester, what's the matter with you? I sputtered. Do I look like a tomato? Oh, it doesn't matter anyway, Harold. They don't understand. How can human beings read... Deuceans. Funny rabbit. How can human beings read the same books I do and still be so thick? Our conversation was interrupted. Mrs. Monroe picked up Chester and cuddled him. I was praying she would not add insult to injury by kissing his nose, which he hates more than anything. Poor Chester, do you need a little love? Do you know what I'm going to do, you big ball of fuzz, you? Uh-oh, I could tell it was coming. I'm going to give you a kiss on your little nose. Yep, I could tell that was coming, all right. Chester knew better than to resist. He went limp in Mrs. Monroe's arms. Mr. Monroe took the towel off Chester. I still don't know why he's wearing my towel, he said. I think he must be cold, dear. Here's your towel. Why don't you get his kitty sweater? Chester looked ill. He can wear that all day. As Chester was being buttoned into his bright yellow sweater, with little purple mice and cowboy hats all over it, Mr. Monroe said, "What about those vegetables? Shall I speak to Tom Kerrigan?" "Yes, dear," Mrs. Monroe said. "Why don't you? I'm sure there's some explanation. In the meantime, I'll change markets. To tell you the truth, I'm much more worried about Chester. We'd better keep our eye on him." Chester and I did not speak until late afternoon. I was busy nursing my neck, and Chester was busy hiding under the sofa, too embarrassed to be seen. When we did speak at last, it was a brief exchange. "Hey, Chester," I called when he finally crawled out from under. "We don't have to worry about any vampire bunnies anymore. All we have to do is stand outside his cage in that sweater, and he'll laugh himself to death." Chester was not amused. "That's right, make fun, all of you. No one understands. I tried to warn them, and they wouldn't heed. Now I'm going to take matters into my own hands." Whereupon Chester and his 16 purple mice went into the kitchen for dinner. Uh-oh. Well, Chester's first plan didn't work. I wonder what kind of crazy shenanigans he's going to get up to next time. Okay, well, Deuces and I are going to head outside, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!